Welcome to The Growth Project, a podcast brought to you by AMPLOS. In the studio today, Dr. Drew Brannon, joined by Dr. Cory Shaffer to talk a little bit of college football. How's that sound to you over there, Doc?
That sounds great. We're 6 weeks into the season and we've yet to talk college football. We've got some eager listeners out there who want some insight. So,
well, we're definitely late because I've got a feeling our listeners did not wait 6 weeks to start watching college football.
That's right.
So they've got plenty on their minds, and we're going to dive in today. So Cory, why don't we start here? There was a really interesting quote last week, I think it was, by courtesy of Coach Lane Kiffin, he's always good for a quote or two, some of which we would talk about on this podcast, others we would not. But can you lay that out a little bit for us? Like, what did he say? What did he put out there in the media last week that really got our attention?
Yeah, so he told ESPN on October 1st, quote, "In my opinion, dynasties are over." He went on to explain, he said, Alabama with Coach Saban and then Kirby at Georgia, where they have those rosters year in, year out, and there would be a bunch of wins by 30 points in the conference. Those days are done. Now, as a guy here who works with Georgia, I have a feeling you have something to say about that.
I hope they're not totally done, for the record.
Right. But that's, and then, of course, I'm sure there are plenty of probing questions, and he went on to add a couple other things that we'll get into. Just out of the gate, like, that was his point. Dynasties are over. And again, that's something, I mean, you mentioned before we started, Kiffin is willing to tell the truth and call it like it is. And, I think he's got a pulse on this thing that maybe others don't. And this is what he's stating. And I think there's some evidence at this point that maybe there's something here. But yeah, that I think is a good starting point for us, just to break that down, talk about why that is and what are the implications of that and so on.
Well, just as a footnote, I find Lane Kiffin to be pretty refreshing, honestly, because, everyone's familiar with that term of coach speak, and there are some strategic reasons that make a lot of sense why coaches are wise to get up to the microphone and primarily do coach speak, but he's not really one of those. He's not afraid.
No. And again, coach speak, define what coach speak is to you.
Coach speak would be standing at the podium and saying things about your opposing team that you're about to play that really aren't that true, would be one of them. Mm-hmm. And then basically talking about the landscape of what's going on in a way that would be no different from what you've always done, quite honestly.
Yeah. To me, coach speak is like the willingness to say nothing about everything and everything about nothing.
Yeah. That's well said.
I learned from one of the pro baseball players that I worked with in terms of media training, how they're taught to, talk to the media, is the mushroom technique.
I've heard this, but I can't remember what the mushroom is.
Yeah. So the mushroom technique is keep them in the dark and feed them crap.
Ah, that's right.
And that feels like a lot of coach speak, right? You're just saying like the most obvious things. You hear it all the time. In-game interviews, you hear it, right?
Oh,
that's the epitome of it.
We got to play better. We got to execute.
Right. Like, we just need to run the ball. We need to stop the run, we need to get off the field on third down. It's just, you're saying something, but you're really saying nothing, right?
So here's my best example. I told the guys before the game, this was going to be a line of scrimmage kind of game.
That's right.
When is it ever not a line of scrimmage kind of game?
Yeah. Okay. So that's what I think in terms of, Kiffin, right? That's kind of what's refreshing about him, is he's not just going to give you the political check the box answer. He's going to tell you what he honestly thinks.
Yep.
Generally speaking. So why is this topic front of mind for Kiffin and plenty of other people 6 weeks into the college football season?
I think there's a number of reasons. The most glaring one that was only revealed more this past weekend in the games is distribution of talent. And then the trickle down of that is just how much parity you see in college football. Like, I feel like 6 weeks into the season, we have seen more games that would surprise you than we've seen in a long, long time. And we're only 6 weeks in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it all comes back to just overarching the college football landscape, how much it has changed, and those changes sort of yielding, as you noted, just tighter margins than ever before.
Yeah, that's it.
There aren't the same gaps in talent distribution and so on that sort of historically there have been in college football, at least in the last 20, 30 years.
Right. Yeah. So let's walk through that, because I think probably a lot of our listeners aren't necessarily completely up to speed on what that has meant practically. And so maybe an easy way to do that would be to kind of connect recruiting and NIL, which, if you're not yet familiar, back on July the 1st, there was a new law passed that allowed universities to directly pay players. All Powerful Four schools are working with a minimum budget of $20.5 million that they distribute across the sports, however they decide to do that. Nearly every school in Power Four football is distributing the overwhelming majority of that pool to football. So these football programs, whoever they are, whether it's Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss, whoever it might be, have this pool of money to then spend. And what people aren't necessarily aware of, I'll do a practical example. Let's imagine, just take any position group from a recruiting standpoint. We'll just pick tight ends and let's say you have the top 10 ranked tight ends coming out of high school in the country. Whereas in the past, some of these, blue blood, upper tier programs could really stockpile this talent. It's changed a lot. And so take, whoever that number one tight end in the country is, he is going to be offered a certain sum of money to go play wherever it might be. And then once he makes his decision, he's off the board. Well, whoever got him would also love to sign the 9 remaining tight ends that are in the top 10 in his group. But guess what? There are all these other schools that have a top tier tight end budget they've yet to spend that they can then go and use on the 9 remaining top 10 players. And so whoever got that first guy off the board, you're not getting the other 9, because whatever you paid the guy that you did successfully land, they're going to be paying that or more all these other schools for the remaining players.
Yeah, I think it comes back to, more than anything, this is really hitting on 2 points, but players now more than ever are going to follow the money. That's what it looks like. And so coming back to the core of it, it's like player mobility is at an all-time high.
Right.
And especially many listeners will be familiar, but some may not. This is not like the NFL where you are signing a contract for X period of time. I mean, these players literally within 1 year will transfer to multiple schools.
Yeah, they can.
Right. And now I think things are starting to catch up, where players will have to sign contracts and that type of thing. And
yeah.
But anyways, at the heart of it is player mobility. And even Kiffin, he went on to say in the same interview, he said, quote, "When I was at Alabama, they'd be like, go watch the outside linebackers. And there's 6 of them over there that are first round picks. That's not going to happen anymore, because if they don't play, then they're going to leave. They can't keep them all anymore."
Right.
And that's kind of your point, whether it's in recruiting or it's like, hey, we already have, here's our roster of outside linebackers, tight ends, whatever. Essentially the second these players sniff like, oh, I'm not going to get the reps that I want, like I'll just go somewhere else.
Go elsewhere. And
at the moment, there's not really any rules regulating against that. And that fluidity of rosters is what Kiffin is saying here, is going to be a real challenge for any team to just stockpile and retain talent.
Can't build depth.
Right.
You can't build depth. And so where is all this leading? What we're talking about, as you said, Cory, significantly tighter margins when it comes to the outcomes, right? Because you think you just flush out the example we just talked about. Let's take, just pick an easy position group like your offensive line, and you have your first team O-line. Well, these guys who are not on the first team O-line, to your point, Cory, they probably left. They probably got a great opportunity to go play on the first team offensive line somewhere else, which then means as you get into your season, inevitably things happen. You have injuries, and guess who's the next man up? Probably someone who's never even played college football.
Yeah,
like there's a good chance that you are counting on true freshmen, which has not been the case in the past, in pivotal positions. And so guess what? These games get tighter and tighter and tighter because there's a greater distribution of talent, and teams aren't able to, what Kiffin said, have this dynasty level talent base.
Right. So you take player mobility combined with just more distributed talent across a conference, or just in general across college football. And you're seeing less and less of just the domination
Yep.
that we were familiar with for, again, the last 20 or
long
30
time.
years in college football, especially.
Yeah, I mean, look at the example of this. I mean, even as recently this weekend, one of my neighbors down the street, one of my best friends, was a former athlete at Vanderbilt. Of course, to this day, big Vanderbilt fan, and was a little disappointed that they lost to Alabama over the weekend. But I had to kind of stop him and say, hold on a second. College game day decided to show up in Tuscaloosa, Alabama for Alabama to play Vanderbilt. In the previous version and renditions of college football, I don't think that would have happened.
That sentence never would have been uttered.
No.
That's right.
No chance.
So the other piece here that's relevant, just to come back around to this landscape, is now with conference expansion, for one, right? So the addition of new teams, right? New teams in the SEC, new teams in the Big Ten, and so on. And then now a move to a 9-game conference schedule, right? That just means the number of tough quality opponents that a team has to face every year just went up.
Yep.
Like that's one less, quote, if you're familiar with college football language here, one less cupcake on the calendar and one more in-conference opponent that you have to face. Right. So everything that we just mentioned, right? More distribution of talent across the conference, player mobility, and now this added piece of more teams in these conferences, plus extra conference games. There go your margins.
There go your margins, which means you're playing harder, more physical games, more
Correct.
injuries. And it's yet another game on your schedule where it is much, much harder to get guys in the game who wouldn't be getting in the game otherwise to get reps, to get them happier so they won't leave.
And it's harder now to even develop talent.
Correct.
That's, deeper on your roster, even just freshmen and recruits you're bringing in.
Yep.
Like if they're not seeing the field, how quickly they can be impatient and want to leave.
100%. So we have all of these things, all these dynamics converging in creating what I would call kind of like the new world of college football. And we see all this in what we do at AMPLOS. And from my perspective, it's like, well, guess what? Here's where we come in. So Cory, like, how do you see it in the sense of, given all of these things we're discussing and given the tighter margins than ever, how does the world of performance psychology fit in more notably now, maybe than ever?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a couple of things. I think one, and maybe at the most simplest level, but also probably the most challenging thing to do, is this highlights the importance of having a culture where players do want to stick around, even if it does mean being patient.
Yeah.
And again, that is much easier said than done in this current landscape. But I don't think that's necessarily something that you can just push to the side because of the challenges due to the landscape, if that makes sense.
Right. Totally.
Right. It's still something that we have to prioritize and value. And again, given the work that we do in this space, I just think there's a premium on it now, more so now, arguably than ever.
Yeah. Well, like you think about whether it's in football, whether it's in whatever industry some of our listeners might be in, if and when a person decides to be a part of something, like why do they stick around? Well, it's what you're talking about right now, especially in college football, right? Like I want to be a part of something. I want to feel like I have relationships that are real, that there's authenticity involved, that someone's got my back. Now, you probably don't have the option to say, hey, we're not going to pay you, even though all these other people are, but we're going to expect you to stick around. We're not talking about it. We're not naive to this, but you're trying to create differentiators. That's the key. Can you create differentiators so that as a person thinks about where they want to be, culture becomes a competitive advantage? And it will not happen without, as you're saying, a thoughtful, systematic, ongoing plan.
And some of this too is culture / like coach development. You could throw that in
Those
there.
are one and the same.
Yeah, right. And so the reason I say that is, again, just like leader development that we would do, with a company or with an organization. It's great now if you know X's and O's and you're some savant. That's awesome. Yeah. But if you can't relate to, communicate with your players that they want to play for you and stick around for multiple years, it doesn't matter. Right. So like scheme and stuff, sure, that's great. That's really important. But at some point, culture over time is probably going to trump that.
Yeah. There are a lot of people out there from a technician standpoint who understand football incredibly well and can dial it up and all of the above. But right, I mean that you think about the wear and tear and the grind of a season. I can't remember if I've ever heard a player say something about, "Gosh, I love playing for Coach whoever so much because he's such a great like designer of plays,"
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
or he's so great at like dialing up the perfect blitz at the perfect time. Like that's not how generally people think about those things.
Well, and even there's probably an argument out there. I'm sure some of our listeners would say just, like, well, you can still go pay a couple $1,000,000 and get like, I don't know. I think Texas Tech was considered to have like the best transfer portal class in this past cycle. And that's showing up on the field for him. Right. And that's my point is like, okay, well, accruing all the talent is one thing.
Yeah.
Getting it all to kind of gel and play together is a whole other ballgame.
Yep.
And that comes down to the things that we're talking about here, right? What's the culture of your program, the relationship between players and coaches and so on. So I don't necessarily fully agree with just like, oh, well, they can just go buy more talent. Like,
Yeah.
no, that's just not how it works, man. There are plenty of examples, in fact, where I would argue that's highlighted, right? We're just accruing all the talent doesn't just result in more wins or a national championship or whatever.
We'll pick an easy game from this past weekend. Penn State, UCLA. I'm pretty sure I know the more talented team in that game, but that's not the way it went.
Right.
That's not the way it went. So yeah, I absolutely agree. And let's make a connection here for just a second too. We're talking primarily kind of our launch point is college football today, but on the whole concept of competing in a realm of really tight margins. Many of our listeners who are in the business world of various industries, that's the only world you've ever lived in, where it's always tight, where it's highly competitive, where the talent is distributed extremely evenly, and they yet aren't necessarily focusing on the things we're talking about today, which our first point in this has just been about culture and building and sustaining. But those folks that are listening and thinking like, well, gosh, this tight margin world we're describing, that's the world I live in. So we also really want to be challenging you guys to think about, well, what does this mean for you? What does this mean for your industry and within your team?
Yeah. All right. What else do we want to hit on?
So certainly the cultural piece is huge. Another one I would add to the list is the premium this places on a team's ability to execute mental skills at a really high level. And let's just play it out, right? So talent is more evenly distributed. It's going to lead to tighter games, closer scores, pressure moments. The tighter the game is, the more pressure is involved. And if you lack the mental skills needed to be at your best when it matters most, you won't be at your best when it matters most. And so whereas in the past, what are we saying? Maybe the translation of this is in a 12-game regular season, in the old world of college football, if you're a top-tier team, whoever that is, Oregon, Georgia, doesn't really matter, how many times a year were you in a dogfight? I don't know, like just make it up. 3, 4 in the regular season? Like how many times a year were you in a really tight game where you were feeling huge pressure?
Well, and you could probably circle those before the season
That
even
too.
started.
Great point. You knew it ahead of time.
You knew ahead of time. You could actually prepare for it specifically if you wanted to.
100%. You already knew, like when Oregon was headed to Penn State a couple of weeks ago, they already knew it was going to be a challenging game.
Yeah,
it's no surprise. So that's a great point. Is you already knew. Whereas now you have all of those plus the games that you didn't necessarily anticipate being tough are really hard. Mm-hmm. And I think increasingly we'll begin circling like all the games and thinking of them differently. But go back to our point here is if you aren't training and developing the mental skills needed to combat performance anxiety, if you aren't training in grit and resilience, if you aren't training in mental toughness skills, you're behind. And when these moments that are jumping on your team and negatively impacting their performance, you got to be sure they have the skills they need to have to know how to handle it.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. And, we were, I speak from Oregon standpoint, to start their year, you look at their schedule and they didn't necessarily have the biggest tests, the first couple of weeks especially. But, week 3, week 4, or week 3, excuse me, we at least start conference play. It's like, all right, this is another Big Ten team.
Yeah.
And we're on the road. And even those, my anticipation coming in is just like, these are the types of challenges now that, does it fully move the needle like a Penn State whiteout? No. But this is a really important step for us just to get a taste of like what it's like to play on a road, travel across a time zone or two, potentially just a little more resistance than we've met in the past, or, in the previous couple of games. So there is that element of like, okay, we know this is maybe just a smaller challenge ahead of many bigger ones. But there was still inherently moments in that of like, I kind of hope our guys get a little bit uncomfortable and feel a little bit differently, because man, we are going to need this as much as possible. It's almost like now you kind of want it to be that way, because down the line, especially, you're not really sure when it's going to show up, but it's going to show up.
It's coming. Who was that game against?
That was just Northwestern. Who's not like a necessarily a scary opponent.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's on the road. And for our guys, it was the equivalent of like a 9 a.m.
Oh, that's right.
kick. Right. So like there were some weird little challenges about it, playing in a stadium with like 12,000 people. Yeah.
That's it?
Yeah. It's a temporary stadium. They played 12,000 people.
Oh, wow.
It was 9 a.m. in our guys' minds, and it's just kind of like, okay,
That's a lot of variables.
This is at least a test and some weird things about this that make this hard.
Right.
Let's see how we handle it.
Right.
So anyways, the point is just, it's almost now what, at least my perspective is, I want players to anticipate challenge in every week, like you described.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, and I think that's part of our job, right? Is we don't ever want them to feel so confident that borderline arrogant or complacent, they think they can just walk in and like, well, yeah, we'll just out talent them.
Right.
Even if that's the case, that's not a great mindset to be establishing. So
no. And that's, I think that's the way you're describing that is spot on, in the sense too of, so those games are, according to the trends and the data, those are harder now than they once were.
Yeah.
And which means that like players are being put on the spot and pushed and stressed and challenged mentally with greater consistency than they have been in the past, which again circles us all the way back to, why is it so vital to train mental skills? Why is it so vital to work on your culture? Hugely important. And then a third one I'll toss out maybe for you to expand on is, why does leadership development become increasingly important in this new world?
Yeah. I mean, again, for all the reasons we've talked about to a degree, right? It's, if you think about off the field versus on the field, like you just mentioned, to have somebody on the field to lead, to have somebody on the field it was really refreshing to see one of the recap videos from Oregon, and how coaches, players, everybody at moments in that Penn State game, like deliberate, like, hey, like, let's take a breath.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that was cool to see. That was a proud moment for me to watch them in the moment of like very stressful situations be doing that. And so, I think on the field, it's obvious, like you want somebody who can kind of take command and, push the guys in the right direction. Off the field, I think it matters too, because that gets back to the piece about culture, right? Totally. I think you have good, strong leadership in the locker room, player-led teams, that's going to impact the culture in a really positive way. Again, I think that's indicative of a healthy environment, probably one that players are more likely to want to stay in.
Yep. No, I'm glad that was where I was headed to. The last part of what you said is the locker room, because, I don't know what it's like at Oregon. I know that I've never been in our locker room and seen a coach in there. And even if I'm talking like not on game day, obviously, but like the locker room during practice facility, week in and week out. Of course, they've been in there before, but never that I've seen. And beyond that, if you need coaches in your locker room to regulate things, and like, you're in big trouble. So I don't know a time in the history of college football where leaders in the locker room have ever been more important. So then that gets back to, what do we know and understand philosophically about leadership development is, you got to work on it. I've never met an 18 to 22-year-old student athlete who had everything in a college football world, really any sport, who he or she had everything they needed to have to be a great leader. Heck, I've never met that in C-level executives who are in their 50s. It's a process of training and development and growth. You have to work at it. So we would be extremely naive to expect that today's college football player on his own can just know how to handle the complexity of what's going on in locker rooms.
And again, there are challenges to that, as we already described, right? Because it's one thing to try to get the leaders of your current team developed into strong leaders, but then it's another thing to invest in and try to start establishing some leaders that can come behind them.
That's right.
Right. So investing in sort of your next team, your next generation of leaders, again, challenge because of everything we talked about earlier, right? Like they could up and leave and all that. But I do think sort of empowering them and showing them that, hey, we are invested of you. We can see that you kind of have what it takes to potentially be a great leader for this team in the future. We want to start investing in you now. Again, that's just probably another element that maybe a guy's more likely to stick around if they feel some of that coming from the coaching staff.
Yeah, you got to move far enough back on the pipeline to be affecting people who are earlier in their career. There's no doubt. And from a retention standpoint, it makes a heck of a lot of sense to be doing that. So, I mean, to me, those are three huge categories of leadership, mental skills training, and cultural growth, development, sustainment, where in this new world of college football, I think that the role that we're playing as performance psychologists is only going to get more and more important. I think it's only going to grow more and more. What else would you add to that list, and anything else?
No, I mean, those are three pretty big, broad buckets that you can lump a lot into. I guess the other piece that you could throw out there is related to like recruiting talent and that type of thing. The identification of it, sort of finding the right fit for your program. There's probably a premium on that as much as there has ever been. And again, now with only so much money to spend as opposed to just stockpiling, right? Selection becomes very, very important.
Your misses become more glaring.
Exactly. And I know that's something that, again, our listeners in the business world can certainly understand and appreciate, the identification of talent and retainment of talent and all that. But yeah, I would throw that in there. Just, I think you have to be better than ever at making sure that who you are going to get, especially if you're paying for them.
Yeah.
Right.
Big investment.
Correct. Like there's such a big investment now, like a true like financial hit to your team. I mean, man, there are players on every roster, I would bet, who are making 18 to 22 year olds, as you described, making $1 million who hardly see the field.
Yeah, I'm sure there are. That's a costly investment.
Exactly. That's what we're talking about. So, in terms of now, like there are real tangible resources to point to with that. And so selection is probably going to be as important as ever.
And just, let me throw this fact out here too, that we forgot to mention earlier, just that we need any more evidence of how hard it is to really know where you stand and how the distribution of talent has changed things. So here's the preseason top 5 AP poll. Number 1, Texas. Number 2, Penn State. Number 4.
3 was Ohio State.
Sorry, 3 was Ohio State. Yep. 4 was Clemson. And then who was 5? Do you know?
I can't remember off the top.
Was it you guys?
It might have been you guys.
We were not in the top 5 in most polls. But so at any rate, okay, let's just focus on number 1, number 2, and number 4. So 1 Texas, 2 Penn State, 4 Clemson. Those 3 teams have a combined record of 8-7 currently. And are any of them ranked?
Great question.
I don't think
so.
I don't think any of them are ranked.
I don't think so.
So we are not college football historians, but I would love to know, and I feel like I probably know the answer, that's never happened before. Within 6 weeks, 3 teams in the top 5 are no longer in the top 25.
Yeah, it'll probably be an Aflac trivia question this weekend on game day.
I would have a hard time. If someone told me that had happened before, I would need to see evidence of it. And so, like, to think that that's what's going on.
LSU was up there, weren't they? Now my mind's just running to try to figure out who those teams were. Sorry.
You might be right. But at minimum, we've got these 3.
Yeah.
At minimum, we've got 3 teams in the top 5 that are no longer ranked. We're only in week 6.
Mm-hmm.
That's extremely different.
Yeah. Extremely different.
And so again, just here's what I think is going to happen. When any landscape shifts this dramatically, this quickly, it puts people on their heels to some degree. But in time, I think more and more increasingly, people will begin asking the question of like, what do we do now? Like, where do we go from here? How do we grab a hold of any sense of a competitive advantage? How do we find 1% here, 2% there? And I think that what we do in the space that we're in is going to become something that people are trying to get their hands around because they see the importance and recognize how vital it is to success.
Yeah, I agree. I don't necessarily think, but then it'll just be an arms race.
Could be
to go potentially,
Could be.
sort of get the right resources in those spaces. So it'll be interesting to see that too.
That's a whole nother discussion. Resources are going to be more of a premium.
Yeah.
Because I think that's a whole nother podcast perhaps, but there are plenty of coaches out there who, if they could give back $20 million of their $100 million facility, they would. They would gladly give up the bells and whistles that amounted to $20 million in exchange for $20 million to spend on players.
Yeah, that's right.
There's no doubt they would. So we'll see. Be interesting to see where that goes. Okay. So I know we need to kind of move toward a finish here. Maybe a final thing I would want to say is I think there are a lot of principles that we've talked about that are applicable way, way outside of college football. When you're talking about culture and mental skills and leadership development, we could take those variables and they could touch down in any industry at any time as key pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah, I agree. I think, like you mentioned it earlier, college football is really just the vehicle, right, for talking about some more important broad topics than just necessarily football. But
yep. Okay, well, thank you to our listeners for tuning in. Always value your feedback, whether it be on Spotify or Apple Podcast. Let us know how we're doing and how we can continue to serve you better. We look forward to the next time we can be together. Thanks so much.